Hey everyone, welcome to Yoga Teacher School. My name is Kelly, and today we're going to be talking about whether or not you should demo during your yoga classes. This is a common question. It comes up during teacher training and beyond all the time, and it is something of a hot topic actually in the world of yoga teaching. I feel like at least once a week on Instagram, I see something pop up about should you demo, shouldn't you demo, it's right to demo because of this, and it's wrong to demo because of that. And so I wanted to join the conversation and share my opinion, and it's alive for me right now and something I felt like sharing about because someone that I'm currently mentoring, and I had a conversation about this yesterday, and he was sharing with me a breakthrough that he experienced in his teaching this week, and I wanted to share it with you. So let's start out and talk about what works well with demoing. And what I mean by demoing, if you're not a yoga teacher yet and you don't know what we're talking about, is being on your mat and doing poses along with your students as practice is happening. Here's what works well about demoing. And I don't think, I guess I'll start by saying, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. Like, should you demo, should you not? I don't know. Here's what I think works well about demoing. One thing that's great about demonstrating poses for people is that it works really well for your visual learners. I find that as I teach classes, when I tend to demo more often is if I'm aware or if I notice that there's newer students in my class or beginner students in my class and I can see them looking around like not quite sure what's going on. Tends to be the times that I get on my mat more so that people can see what's happening. Right, so that's a time that demoing works well, and it works really well for people who learn visually. The other thing that's great about demoing, in particular as a new teacher, is that the cues that you're giving can arise from what's happening, right? So you know what's happening in your own body, therefore you know what to say next. It makes it less easy to get lost in your sequence because you're doing it right alongside of your students, right? So you know what's coming next. So that can be really helpful. Um, The other time that I tend to demo a lot when I personally am teaching is if I'm teaching something that's a little bit complicated. So, a tricky transition, a pose we don't do all of the time, just something out of the ordinary that people might not know exactly what I mean as well as they would when I said something like Warrior 2, that's familiar that we do all of the time. So, if there's something I'm asking people to do that's novel or unique, I tend to demo more. The downsides of demoing, and I do believe that there tend to be more downsides to demoing than there are upsides. And here's why. When we get habituated to demoing for our students, it can become like a crutch, right? So it's a way of avoiding kind of really getting out there and getting into people's field of vision where they can see you all of the time. You're walking around the room, right? And it does take a little more of like, I'm not doing the poses right alongside of people. So you have to really trust that you know your sequence, you know what's coming next. You have to have a little bit more confidence in yourself to be able to stand up and get off of your mat. What I notice a lot in mentoring with newer teachers is that when they tend to be on their mat is often they're not on their mat and also looking around the room at what's going on with their students, but they tend to be on their mat and a little bit like looking down, like they're in their own experience. So it can become a way to kind of like you stay in your safe bubble while the class is happening around you. So that can be a downside of demoing. The other thing that happens, and this is an important thing for yoga teachers to always remember, is that anytime we're teaching and when we build studentship and we have people coming to our classes over and over and over week after week after week, right, is that what we do all of the time, I don't want to say trains, but maybe it conditions the people who are taking our class to what we're doing. So if we're demoing all the time, it trains people to be watching us for the next cue, for what's coming next. So we kind of condition people not to be listening so much to the words that we're saying, but be watching us. I think the what that can take away potentially from our students is the ability to develop the quality of a moving meditation in their practice. If they're watching us, they're not on a drishti, they're not on a focal point, and they're less in their internal experience than when you're kind of just the voice in the background guiding them through their own experience as they've developed a focal point somewhere else. So we can kind of rob a little bit of experience from our students when we've conditioned them really to watch us all the time for the thing that's coming next, and they don't have to pay so much attention to our words. So this teacher that I've been working with, and this is a common thing, so common, that happens in the progression of teaching, and he just happened to get there really quick, is I gave some feedback a couple of weeks ago, like, hey, when you gave this pose or that pose, what you didn't notice because you were on your mat kind of looking here is that some people in the room around you were in a completely different pose. And when we're kind of demoing the pose, we don't always see, we can only be aware of so many things at one time. We don't always see what's going on around us. And so we can completely miss that someone may not have picked up on a cue or some kind of thing that we're trying to take them to. Right. And so what he said to me yesterday when we met is he had taught again since then. And he said, I made a decision that I was going to demo some, like 20% of the class. And the other 80% of the time, I was going to watch what was happening in the class. And I was going to stand on my mat or I was going to walk around. And it changed everything. It changed everything for me. And that's really it can be true. If you get in the habit of demoing all the time and then you stop, it can change everything. The most powerful tool that you have as a teacher is your ability to watch what's happening in the room. So it doesn't matter so much like how much you know about anatomy or the poses or anything like that. What is impactful is your ability to look at someone in the experience they're having and just offer them an opportunity. Kelly, that's me, right? It's impactful for me when a teacher says like, Kelly, move your knee 2 inches to the right. You can see what's happening. And then your cues are a response to what's happening in the room around you. What the person I'm mentoring experienced is he said, what I'm aware of now is that previously when I was teaching, the cues that I was giving were kind of just like a spitball of all of the information that I knew about a pose. So everything that I learned about Warrior One, well, maybe you could do this with your wrists, and maybe you could do this with your knee, or maybe you could do this with your hips. When I was watching what was happening, instead of trying to also do the practice and demo the poses and look the right way, is that it freed me up to see like, oh, people haven't done this thing I want them to do. And then all I have to do is say that. That's where the cues come from. And the most effective cues come from your ability to look around the room and speak to what's happening in front of you. Because it doesn't matter what we've learned in a book about a pose, it doesn't matter what you learned in teacher training about a pose. What matters is your ability to respond to what's happening in front of you. And so again, like the one reason, and I think there's a time and a place for demoing in your classes, and I demo myself, like again, when things are tricky, when things are complicated, when I know that I've got new people in the room who are trying to figure out what's going on, I will be on my mat or I will be in front of them in their visual field. I will move to a different side of the room if I have them facing the side so that they can see me and understand what's going on. There's a time and a place. But you get free to make impactful cues that are like super on point with what's happening in the room. And that's when your students really start to feel like, oh my gosh, this person's in my head, or like they know what's happening with me because you do. You're paying attention and you're clued into what they need. And also, you're cued into like, I set a cue this way and no one moved, nothing happened, or what I wanted to happen didn't happen. And then you have the ability to refine again and respond. And your students actually in that moment giving you a piece of feedback about what cues are effective and what are not. So, should you demo in class? The answer is sometimes, maybe. And it is important. I really think it's important as a teacher to develop the skill of getting up off your mat, looking around the room and looking at the people and the bodies and the poses in front of you and responding to that in the moment feedback from the people that you're with. So that's my take on should you demo or should you not demo during your yoga classes. If you have a topic that you'd like to see us address here on Yoga Teacher School, please leave it in the comments. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you more. Thanks for being here.